So welcome everyone to Who Controls Audience Data and Data-Driven Revenue. This is actually going to break with the tradition so far today and not be a formal debate. It's just going to be a free-form discussion with our great panelists. And Nadine and I are going to switch places now. She's doing my job behind the camera there. Nadine is also going to be editing streaming media next month for me. She doesn't know that yet, but maybe we won't just completely change jobs here. But so welcome everyone. This is, let me get my questions back up here. So this is a very relevant topic based on what's been going on here already today. I think I think Laura said in the session just now in the panel, she said, or the debate, she said, whoever owns the data has all the power. And and so actually, similar to that, I had this quote from Christy that I wanted to start with that actually kind of inspired this panel, I think. This was something you said to Media Mix earlier this year. Do you remember this? So you said, there's a lot more opportunity in programming these channels for excellence if programmers had the same depth of data that you have in broadcast and cable. The platforms are holding back programmers by not sharing data, and I think they're holding back themselves by not having better data available for programming. Does that sound like you?
I agree with myself,
okay.
Steve. Yes, I do. I think that the entire space I would start with FAST. I think FAST is in need of excellence, and I don't think it's being achieved at the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, so why don't we start with you? I just want to start with introductions so we know who are speaking up here. So why don't you start, Christy?
I'm Christy Tanner. I am the chair of Swerve TV. Swerve has 2 FAST channels, possibly about to be dropped based on what I'm about to say about our distribution partners, but our flagship channel is called Swerve Combat, and we have been going for about 4 years. We're distributed on more than 25 different platforms, and we've been told we're the #1 combat channel among many. There are at least a dozen combat channels. On the basis of that success, we launched our second channel, which is called Swerve Sports. It's entirely focused on women's sports, everything from volleyball to basketball to gymnastics and tackle football and many, many other things. That launched on Roku and Pluto this summer, and we launched on Roku in the UK last week. So that's what I'm doing right now, and part of the reason I speak with frustration about the space is that I launched the first FAST channels for CBS 10 years ago, and we had no data then, and we have about the same level of data now running FAST channels, and it's really, really frustrating, and I do think it's holding the space back. Okay, so enough about me.
Bruno?
I do agree with you as well. So I'm Bruno Giner. I'm from NPAW. So at NPAW we do data intelligence for, 15 years or something. So if data is power, we are in the power production business somehow. So we're collecting users' behavioral data from all aspects, from customers' life cycle to navigations and interaction with the content, passive, active consumption, and preferences, going through segmentation, personalization, etc., etc., etc. And we come to this as, a frustrated part because we produce a lot of data, and this data is not used, neither on improving for fast channels, for instance, improving how content is arranged or delivered or made. And for ads, the same. So the way that we are delivering more contextualized or more relevant ads as well, improving monetization. So what we feel is that we produce a lot of power, but this power just gets wasted somehow. So.
Hi, I'm Natasha. I'm the head of data research and measurement at Vevo. So the data analytics, data science, campaign measurement, and market research teams roll under me. Vevo is the global music video network. We're distributed on YouTube and FAST channels, so 2 very challenging types of endpoints for data and audience data. My team interacts with this topic in a variety of ways, everything from partnership to operationalization, and then eventually like the monetization of the data and how exactly we do that across so many endpoints.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Haycock. I'm the founder of WonderWorks Consulting. We are a small boutique consulting services that provides product and strategy around how to optimize metadata to make your supply chain more efficient and drive monetization.
Great, and I think I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Steve Nathans-Kelly, editor of Streaming Media. So I'm going to ask questions of our great panelists here for about 45 or 50 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to audience questions. And I'll just start off by throwing a question at one of you. I'll call on one of you specifically, and then anyone else can jump in after that. So yeah, the first question is, what is working well and what isn't working in streaming data? And we'll start with Christy.
Well, I'd say what is working well is that we do have close to real-time data from our platform partners. So I can go into a dashboard for each one of our partners, and I can see how we did in a certain day. I can see how a certain show did. I can parse that data pretty well. However, I would say it's nevertheless, it's not integrated across platforms. It's apples to oranges from platform to platform, and there still remains a level of interpretation required for the data that is leaving a lot to guesswork that really doesn't need to be guesswork. So things that we don't know. I know how well a certain program did. I don't really know how well a program retained its audience from show to show. And I think retention is something that would really improve the overall audience experience. Or let's say if we knew what retained an audience, we could keep them from changing the channel, we could give them a better experience. And right now, that's just a big hole. So those are two examples of things that are working and not working. I could go on and on about it.
To build on that, it's interesting because I think there's a lot that's not working that well, and maybe Christy, you would agree. Like there's a lot of fragmentation issues. There's ability to zoom in on data, but it's also what I'm noticing is in the last few years, it's encouraging a lot of innovation too when it comes to measurement and planning, and to some extent targeting as well. You see new vendors popping up, new ad tech companies that are attempting to circumvent the walled gardens, find ways to holistically look at the data so that publishers aren't left to do all of that in-house, because for some smaller publishers, that's really not an option.
Anyone else? Anything to add? Okay, well, yeah, the next question is for Natasha. Just to start with Natasha. So how do you work with partners to share data for mutual benefit?
Yeah, so I think it varies, but it's a really important part of the partnerships that we have. So with our distribution partners, data sharing is a big part of what makes the whole relationship successful. It relates to our ability to monetize. And I think when you enter some of these partnerships, you start out from a place where you're like, okay, they have standard TNCs, we're gonna get what we get, and that's sort of what it is. And with certain distribution partners, that is the case, because they're very big players and maybe you can't do much. But we have found that with some of these partners, we have been able to negotiate for more data to enrich our bid requests, to allow us to create more bundles and better monetize the inventory. And what that's come down to is really being able to prove out ROI and incrementality to them, and like hand-to-hand combat, building these tests and proving out the ultimate ROI for them of giving us some more of that data. The other area where data sharing has become more prevalent for us is on the measurement and planning side. There are more and more tools that we are being asked to integrate into, these agency planning tools, these massive agency MMMs or MTAs. Vevo is a difficult inventory to assess because so much of it is on YouTube, and how do you pull generic YouTube apart from Vevo, right? So a lot of these require custom integrations. And what we've been very successful in doing, and hopefully this lasts, in the past year, we've been very successful in negotiating terms where we do provide that data back, the log level data or whatever it is that the agency or tech company may want to see, but in exchange, they're passing back sort of how Vevo looks within their ecosystem, which is extremely important for us in understanding whether or not we are performant on these KPIs, and we should, how we should be angling ourselves to the advertiser community. And so that's another area where I think data sharing has improved in the past year for us.
Anything anyone else wants to add to that?
Yeah, I believe it's a super nice story because it's yeah, on this, because we are always getting into the same wall. Like, okay, but how can we arrange this collaboration or this data sharing and so on? And yeah, again, on our side, so having the data is so frustrating because you see that the other part could use it and could improve the overall experience of the user. But we all depend on this kind of arrangement that can be beneficial to both sides and so on.
And I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture too. I mean, to be clear, a huge amount of our inventory is on YouTube, and we're not, we're not going to be negotiating with Google on additional audience signals, but yeah, I mean, there are areas of more success.
So, kind of a related question. This is something that I think came up in our pre-call with Stephanie. So, are there new collaborative approaches built around data co-ops or shared dashboards that could help content and platform owners unlock revenue?
Yeah, so Natasha touched on it a little bit. We're seeing a lot of new small companies kind of cropping up and some market leaders now in this particular space, Trade Desk kind of being one, not to name drop, but what they are doing is they're going out and they're negotiating with the actual platforms, right? Access to that rich audience metadata that we all want so desperately. And because they have relationships across lots of the actual platforms, they're able to take it in, break down those silos, and normalize that data, right? So sounds like a no-brainer. They're companies, right? They're there to generate revenue, so they've got goals too. So it is an avenue that I think is going to continue to expand because people don't have the internal resources to have a dedicated team to analyzing YouTube data, a dedicated team to looking at Netflix data. Like you can't keep up with that, right? Not at the pace that these platforms are changing on a weekly, daily basis. So these co-ops offer that safe environment, a good partnership for both sides. Everybody wins. And it's something to definitely look at and to keep your eye on.
Anything to add on that? Or? Okay. Let's go over to Bruno for this one. So how can platforms balance the ownership of audience data while still enabling content providers and advertisers to access the insights they need to drive growth and engagement?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I believe the biggest challenge is this one, to arrange an arrangement that can make it happen. But from a technology perspective, so we have full capability right now, not only NPAW, but many other providers, to structure the data and provide access to all your partners and all your ecosystem in a way, on a super controlled way, so coping to all regulations and making sure that everybody can only access their own data and so on, a standardized way, in a way that can be connected to the rest of the workflow, and make sure that they can use the data without accessing anything that they cannot have rights to. So right now, I mean, the possibilities on creating a multi-tenant structure where you can provide the data, it's a reality. We have, well, one of the cases, for instance, we are partners with Vimeo here in the US. So for them, they have 700 OTT platforms, like small OTT platforms, that they provide access to their own content performance, their own audience data on a controlled way, so everyone can only access their own platforms or their own data. And well, it's 100% possible. We just need to get to agreements and make things happen. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything to add on that? Or okay. So let's go back to Stephanie on this one. So how important is consistent data governance and for effective and ethical data sharing?
Yeah, so I think that really having a strong, grounded metadata framework, if you're a content provider, is key. Because without having that buy-in throughout your supply chain, you start to see the drift. You start to see data changing at critical points. And then ultimately, when it gets back to audience analytics, you're not looking at the same thing you put out, so nobody understands what's going on. The agencies are screaming, sales is screaming. But if you can get that buy-in, and in my prior life at Disney, we took it all the way back to Greenlight with some of that core metadata and leaning into standards, right? Standards help with some of that ethics angles that people struggle with every now and again. And it just makes it so, because that's what industry leaders have said is okay. And if you lean into those, they give you that good, grounded framework that you can tie everything back to. I mean, ITER's a great example of that. Worst case scenario, figure out how you embed that number into your file naming structure, into the core of your metadata delivery specification. So it also helps in the operational troubleshooting, not that that's what we're here to talk about, but like leading into those frameworks can help all around, and minimize headaches I used to have research calling me all the time about why does this data coming back from Comcast not look like what you said it was supposed to on your manifest? And, we started looking at how we could embed the IDs and making sure research had access to those.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. As I was looking at this, like the data governance is something you typically think about in a more technical context, right? Maybe you think like databases, metadata attributed to columns in CSVs. But it is very relevant to some of the chaos we're seeing today in the CTV ad ecosystem, right? There are no standards. Everyone complains about no standards for verification, no standards for audience targeting. And having worked, so prior to my time at Vevo, I worked on the agency side, and prior to that, I worked as a data scientist, consulting publishers and building some of these audiences and these targets. And if you've been in the weeds with the data, you'll know that these things are built lookalike on top of lookalike. You do a match into a big identity graph. It's a 20% match rate, so now you need to like blow it up with another lookalike model, and then now you're going to match again into some other system to activate this audience segment. By the time you go through all that, there is a ton of dilution, and there's no transparency on that, right, to the buyer. The buyer doesn't see that. The buyer just sees, oh, I'm buying pet owners, and they think that there's a high fidelity in that segment. But I think one of the dark secrets is that it may not be a high quality segment, and it may not even be performant. The buyer is going to be spending a 250 CPM to activate on that. Is that really worth the money? And right now there's no accountability on that question in CTV, partially because we don't have good governance, right? There's no necessity. No one has to put, oh, this is the lineage of this audience. This is how it was built. This is where it originated. It's just sort of pick from a menu of options. And then making the problem worse is that there is also a lack of this governance on the measurement side. You run your campaign. What are the standards for how you judge whether or not that was a performing campaign? There's difficulty right now in even ascertaining how you should be measuring those KPIs. So I think the governance problem is a big one and speaks to some of the existential challenges that general CTV advertising has right now.
I mean, how do we get closer to greater standardization?
Well, I agree. It's an existential challenge. I think that it is my opinion and my experience that we too infrequently talk about the viewer and the customer in this space. We we talk in B2B terms about monetization and data, and really, I sometimes think we should ask ourselves why we got into this business. I mean, not to get like too Pollyanna-ish about it, but what I really like about working in the sports space right now is we work with really entrepreneurial, passionate fans of their own sport, whether it's women's elite rugby, women's tackle football, lots of individual boxing and MMA promoters, et cetera. They're doing it because they really love the game. And their goal for them is not necessarily, it's not to arbitrage the fans of rugby. Like, that is not something you would ever hear out of the mouth of the, I'm just making this up about, it's not really the rugby commissioner, but it could be the rugby commissioner. You're never going to hear her say, we're really building an incredible arbitrage machine here for rugby fans. Like, that does not happen. What's so fun about working on this particular channel day in and day out is that you're basically dealing with some real characters who would run through a brick wall to connect the athletes who are great at that sport with people who are fans of it. And their singular goal is to create fandom and hopefully monetize it enough that they can live. They're not even trying to, we all know how much the WNBA players are making right now, not enough. And so if you go further down in the hierarchy of women's sports, they're really not making what the WNBA is making. They have a 1-month season with 6 teams and 4 weeks of play. So I'm bringing this up as an example of, are we in streaming to build a better arbitrage machine, or are we here because we care about entertainment or sports or news or culture? And I think we sometimes lose sight of that. I don't think anybody on this panel's lost sight of it. I just think as an industry, we need to care more about what we're putting in front of people, or we're really just competing with AI slop. And I think some of what we're seeing in the erosion of audience is due to not really caring enough about the viewers and the customers. That's my soapbox for today. That's my 2 cents.
I believe that for at any level, even using AI at its max potential. So if we take that as the main mission, like to improve what's being offered to the customers and to really understand our mission in this business as well, I believe everything makes sense. And from the data-driven perspective, I believe that for the standardization and so on, I believe that the culture moves it. It's not the other way around. I mean, we're not standardizing everything and then starting a culture. So we need to make things possible, make things happen, and then get into trouble, like into problems, and say, hey, we could improve this if we had a better standardization of audience data, or better content metadata, or better this, better that. I believe that the first thing, it's the culture of sharing the data, using the data to improve the consumer's experience.
I think it's really tough because, in a way, you do need to standardize, right? When you have so many small publishers, you're going up against YouTube, Meta, like they define their systems, they define their KPIs, they have their frameworks, and then the buyer comes now, the agency comes to the CTV ecosystem, and they're like, okay, I'm going to buy a little bit of that, a little bit of that. This measurement partner is claiming to be able to measure everything, but they can't really do it. Like, it's just so messy and chaotic. And we're lucky in that there are those case studies that show that the inventory, the content is good, it's premium, it's effective, right? So there's still a belief from the buyer that this is doing something, but I do feel like it's so many leagues behind when it comes to standardization relative to the digital players and the social media platforms.
But I think you both raised an interesting point about metadata. I think good metadata, quality metadata, is a sign of caring. And I think when I look at an EPG and I'm going through the different channels and I see just really vague metadata, like you see those like scheduled programming, you still see that in FAST. Okay, but when you see really detailed metadata that's specific and that makes you want to watch that thing, that tells me that somebody put time and effort into that because they think it's good and they think I might want to watch it, as opposed to, here's a library that we're trying to monetize because nobody else would buy it, which is what a lot of channels are, let's face it.
Yeah,
they should be dropped.
Yeah. And that's why I think metadata strategy, right, is truly the backbone that's going to drive innovation continue to drive innovation really in this industry. Like, you've got to appreciate the value of each of these different fields and how they can enable personalization on the actual platform, but unlock monetization. Like,
I think we should have a T-shirt that says "Metadata is caring," and could someone buy the URL for me while I'm sitting up here? I'll pay you back.
I'll make that.
Metadata is caring or something.
I bribed my team with stickers back in the day. They got little TV, like this is my TV computer stickers to put on their laptops if they started to care about what they were actually putting out.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that because, you know, we are a startup.
little
and
things.
Trying to get the new person to be like, no, it's actually really important that you put in what sport it is. So, like, that's life.
You know, we were going back and forth on this before the panel. Stephanie, you had talked about the global metadata optimization strategies. I think that you were working on at Disney at one time. Is that? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You just talk about that a little bit? It sounded really interesting.
Yeah, no. So this actually goes back to when we put in our first digital supply chain. So we were prior very disconnected, had tons of silos across the various business teams, and we took over everything kind of end to end. So from greenlight all the way to distribution to platform. At the same time, we were trying to increase our footprint, right? Get on more platforms. So YouTube was kind of the new kid in the block at the time. And as we were putting things out, we were getting lots of phone calls, not only from show executives, but also ad sales executives. Like, the data's not matching. What we're seeing on these platforms doesn't match what you say is going out. And we had to take a step back and really dig in and create a new structure where everybody from production to distribution operations understood why you have 3 titles for something and what it controls in the ecosystem, not only internally, but externally. And who owns that data? Because you're not changing it if you're not part of the team that owns it. You have to contact that team and have those conversations. And what we saw evolve over time was deeper understanding and earlier conversations in the life cycle about what should all be in a synopsis, so that it wasn't, this is scheduled content. You know, it was very descriptive, and it told the audience, and then you could take that and you could create tags, you could create, you know, keyword search things for the SEO, and that has continued on in how they approach all of their platforms, and I think has led them to be a leader in YouTube. If you look at Disney Channel, their YouTube audience is like 10 times bigger than their broadcast audience, and that's just continued to grow and grow every year historically. And it's because that team chose to have a metadata strategy and to actually inform others in the company of the value of that.
I mean, I can attest to that because Disney Vevo is one of our top 10 always. Metadata is actually a huge challenge for us as well. A lot of the music metadata providers are, they're keyed to audio ISRC, right? The song's ISRC, the ID that's associated with the song. Music videos have a different ISRC because technically the audio is slightly different from the true audio. So we don't connect smoothly, to the point around different names too. The name of the song may not be the name of the music video, which may not also be the name of the video on YouTube, because on YouTube, for whatever reason, the label may have wanted to play around with the name a little bit to attract more clicks. So it's very challenging for us to get one source of truth. And the additional thing I'll say about that too is, bringing it back a little bit to audience data, is we have recently added a ton of new metadata into our library using AI technology to scan these videos, the top videos, and figure out what tags can we associate with this that are ultimately targetable for advertising. I think that's becoming a bigger thing. You're hearing a lot of ID-less targeting, right, in the ecosystem, especially relevant for us since we are so heavily on YouTube, where ID-based targeting is not as viable for a partner. And so that's an area of big investment for us. And as it relates to metadata, it also goes back to standards, because we can, yes, theoretically, we can go and slap on whatever tags we want to on these videos, but we've decided to do it in a way that is consistent with the IAB standard contextual tagging taxonomy, because we want to be part of that ecosystem and make it easier for the buyer to understand, okay, I'm already targeting this in the trade desk, now I can target it on Vevo.
Yeah, and if I can comment, I mean, for us, we see that that makes a lot of sense down the line. I mean, what we can then do with segmentation, with, I don't know, experience orchestration, personalization, A/B testing, all depends on metadata. So if you get like, you know, live show, drama, and come on, we cannot draw preferences. We cannot understand how to improve what we are offering. We cannot do anything. So I believe that this also this use of generative AI right now to create the tags is also something very promising, I believe.
Yeah, well, I think it's amazing we got half hour into this conversation without anybody bringing up AI. You know,
You're welcome.
But I mean, are there other ways that generative AI is kind of changing the conversation about data, about audience insights, you know?
Definitely on the, I mean, so it's something that, given my remit, we think a lot about. There's also a lot of caution there, right? There's a lot of, there's outstanding lawsuits between major labels and various LLM companies. But as it relates to Vevo specifically, the initial place we've really been investing time into with regards to applications is operational efficiency. I think I've heard this from other companies across different categories. There are so many applications to generative AI to improving operational efficiency, especially for our ad ops teams, our revenue operations teams. A lot of media is still run in a pretty legacy way, pretty antiquated approach to anything from pricing or campaign optimizations. They're just old standards in place, and it's been hard sometimes to automate that before the advent of some of these newer technologies. So we're seeing a lot of interest there internally in creating automation and just making people's lives easier in one dimension, but then also making them adopt these new tools and think more strategically about what they're doing beyond what they were doing before, which is more manual.
I think AI in the ad space has revolutionized the proposal process, right? To your point, you don't have to be an expert in every single platform now to put those proposals together. Something that used to take 3 months can now take a couple of hours with educated LLMs behind them.
Yeah, like imagine you have a library of 1,000 RFPs you've responded to already. Next RFP comes in, you're hooking that up via RAG architecture, right, to an LLM, and it's going to spit out for you the response. And you can still, you know, humans will still review before sending it to the agency, but you've now saved days of work.
I think operational efficiencies are definitely where we're using it now. I think the potential in streaming is to leverage it better for discovery, and by that I mean particularly with live events, real-time discovery. You know, let's just say it's in sports. That's something I think about a lot. The ability, while a game or a competition is happening, to say this is a really hot competition, putting clips out into social to drive discovery back to other platforms, I think is a real opportunity that we're starting to see low-cost tools that enable this to leverage it, and again, to sort of help people realize that goal of bringing more fans to their sports.
I know you look like you had something you wanted to add.
I work for the machines. I support the machines. Yes, totally. So I believe that in the end, I believe we just need to have this passion on how to use it and to use it to improve consumers' experience. But what we can do right now, in one hand for metadata generation, in the other using agents to orchestrate actions and process the data that we are producing, it's amazing. It's amazing. We used to build platforms with, I don't know, 50 dashboards and so on, and you can see everything that is happening everywhere. But we are always looking at what happened last week, and you know, having a meeting today to plan for next week. And the world have changed completely in 2 hours, and anything makes sense, you know. So this process, it's been improved a lot with AI. And to use agents to generate insights and suggestions, or even to administrate parts of the user's experience, I believe it's very, very powerful. And we can make it meaningful. We can make that feel human. It doesn't need to be like a stupid algorithm doing an automation that makes your experience worse. So it can be better. So we see a lot of potential on that. Yeah.
I think it also helps you scale quicker, right? Like if you are dabbling your toes and do I want to go global? Do I want to expand markets? It's going to allow you to do that quicker. Might be bumpy in the beginning, but without you having to invest in a lot of outside resources, you can get translation pretty quickly, and you then can take that budget and spend it wisely on the things that are going to matter and really get you that engagement with your new audience.
Right. I think we should probably have one question very specifically about the monetization side of this. So this is a question to start with Bruno. So how can deeper insight into user attention, engagement, and content flow help improve advertising performance, fill rates, particularly in crowded streaming ecosystems?
For me?
For you.
I believe that everyone maybe can comment on that, but...
I think everyone can.
No, I mean, from our side, because in the end for us, it's what we enable, but we depend on the players to use it and so on. But right now, we are able to identify and unify in a unified way the whole user experience, like not only what people are watching, but why are they watching, what they are looking for, what kind of experience are they looking for, what kind of interaction are they having with the device that they are using, if it's a multi-device, if it's lean back or lean forward experience, if they're passively watching, actively watching, when was the last interaction that they had. I mean, all the correlation with the taxonomy of the contents that they are watching from a contextualized perspective, and the contents that they are watching to drive their own preference to place things that are relevant. So all of that is available. And all of that, it's proven, like how we increase conversions and etc. One thing that I wanted Natasha to comment is being on the bottom of the funnel and being able to work on conversions and so on, and not only on awareness. But all of that, it's proven, but it's not used yet, I feel. Like we use a lot of these data-driven capabilities to improve personalization. That is proven. But for monetization, I don't see that very much. We see a lot of promotions and, I mean, selling through in the platforms, how to position the right product to the right user and so on, but not really down the line. But we're sure that this could be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this one because there's a lot of data vendors out there that are trying to sell you in on something that will help your fill rate, right? Buy this data, license this data, and you're going to see 20%, 20% improved fill rates, your sell-through is going to go up. it's hard to weed through that because there's so much of that it can't all be true. So that's a big part of what we're investigating right now, like which of these relationships is actually going to provide ROI for Vevo. Because I mean, to be honest with you, some of the ones we've tried to activate on, we haven't really seen that lift in CPM or that lift in demand that was promised to us.
Anything else? Anyone
Now,
add something on that?
on the conversion part, do you feel that at some point we will reach that meta level
Of tracking on campaigns.
yeah, the tracking, I can handle the tracking part, but I don't know if we can really work towards conversion directly and really see actions moving the needle.
Yeah, I mean, so like I mentioned, I spend time running a data-driven media agency, so advised heads of marketing on how they should think about their budget and the efficacy of their media was a big focus. How do you measure media? CTV is tough, right? Like I think people want it to feel like Facebook or Meta. They want it to feel like something they can optimize every day and where they can see the ROI. The supposed ROI, this is self-reported by Meta, but that they want to see that it feels real, it feels like you can go and report that to your investors and to your board. Lots of problems with that in the Meta side, but I won't go into that. I think with CTV it's tough though because the CPMs are what they are. They're like $20, $30, $40, $50. Really hard to make that argument short term. There is a lot of powerful research that shows that brand media has very important impact long-term for your strategy, right? It is not all about making the sale this week for most companies. The question then becomes, how do you measure that in a way that doesn't feel antiquated? I don't want the once a quarter MMM. Most CMOs are being asked for more. Show me more like what is happening month to month and how this is effective. It might have long-term efficacy, but I still need to show something. And that's where I think you're seeing the rise of these metrics that feel real-time, like attention, right? Or real-time MMM, real-time MTA. And it's trying to get at that conversion for CTV. At least for Vevo, I don't think, my guess is I don't think we're going to be in a world where we're going to be optimizing against ROAS anytime soon, but I do think we're going to see more mid to high funnel KPIs that we'll be asked to optimize actively against.
Great point. Yeah. So, I think probably the last question before we turn it over to the audience and your questions, let's look to the future. And what do you think the future is going to look like for audiences, programmers, and distributors? And how does data play a part in that? Christy, you want to start on this one?
Well, I think we're at a point where a shakeout is probably coming. There are something like 1,800 FAST channels in the world. We know that consumers only want to subscribe to max 5 streaming 5 SVODs. So there's going to be a natural shakeout, whether it's number of FAST channels or number of SVOD services due to mergers and everything else. And then you have YouTube as a challenger in the space. In terms of the future, I would like to see a future where we have a real drive toward excellence in the streaming space overall, and maybe a little bit less of a winner-take-all mentality. Like I think some of the narrative in our B2B space makes people think they have to drive toward somebody wins this game, and I think it would be better to have sort of a more cooperative industry. That's my opinion.
Yeah, to that point, I think seeing more publisher cooperation would be really interesting in the fast channel space. I don't think it doesn't exist because of like antagonism right now or like any kind of over competitiveness. I just think that it hasn't been a priority and maybe there needs to be that intermediary that's bringing the publishers together. But it is a big area where I think we could find wins, right? Partnering together on measurement, incrementality studies, like there are a lot of ways to do this if there was more of a consortium of these smaller fast channel focused publishers.
Any other thoughts on the future?
I believe that we'll reach that point. I believe that, I mean, I was in a conversation this last weekend, and a guy was just complaining that he was like talking about hair implant, and then he started to see ads of hair implant and so on. And I say, wait, come on, would you like to see, I don't know, ads for bikinis or something? Come on, it's relevant for you. And I believe that we'll reach that, not only on placement. I believe that improving and serving the best experiences possible. We depend on that kind of consortium. We depend on metadata and so on. But I believe that we will reach that simply because it's profitable and it's better. And the ones that will do that first will be successful, and everything will follow. I believe so.
I'll lean into what Christy was saying. I think that the future holds a lot of opportunity for the smaller content providers. I think that people are frustrated with the oligarchs, so to speak. Having come from one, I can say it. And, you know, there's economics involved, right? People are starting to struggle a little bit. There's less disposable income. And so you're going to only want to pay for content that you're interested in. And that's going to start to allow the niche content providers, I think, and the fandoms to grow, because that's what's going to pull on people's heartstrings a little bit. Anime, I'm blanking on the name, but it's the Sony Crunchyroll is making strides in this particular space. I think over the last 2 years, they've grown by leaps and bounds, and it's a strategy that plays into that.
Okay. Laura.
Right. So you started by saying 10 years ago, FAST had problems with measurement. They haven't been solved. You guys sort of chimed in and said, here's a litany of problems with data. That ecosystem is solving actual purchases, like Mountain, performance-based CTV, Trade Desk plus Walmart, Amazon, of course, best example of performance-driven CTV. Does that mean the data industry is that you can tie an ad to a purchase? You don't need that data proxy in the middle. So aren't we going to see a lot of data companies? Either open internet dies and it all goes to walled gardens, or if the open internet survives, the need for data like purchasers goes down, because we're going to increasingly, when we can, tie CTV ad units to actual purchases where we don't need proxy.
I mean, I am aligned with that in that I think for certain brands that will be more attainable. It still doesn't explain. It still won't be able to explain longer term effects of marketing, brand marketing, right? Upper funnel marketing that is still critical even for your basic CPG company, right? They want you to buy toothpaste this week and next week on Amazon, but they also want you to know the brand so that the next time you're in store, you're going to buy the toothpaste, and that's a longer term effect that we won't be able to measure. I think those things work less well, obviously, for different kinds of companies like auto, right? Even QSR. And those are some of the most challenging clients we work with at Vevo when it comes to measurement, because it's so difficult to measure foot traffic, right, against YouTube and FAST simultaneously, and forget about it on the car purchase piece. So I think it's a mix, but you're right in that is disruptive, and it's a major play to be able to link, say, Amazon retail data to CTV. That's a game changer for a whole category of brands.
So I hand over here.
Is the question what would need to exist to make these things non-distributable, or how is it done today? I mean, I can take a stab at this, but you let me know if I'm going the wrong direction. We have, so how it's done today, right, a lot of the agencies come in with their choice of verification vendor. And that's actually a whole operational challenge for us, because depending on the vendor, whether it be double verify or mode or what have you, they may have different, and they will have different opinions on which traffic is valid and how that varies by endpoint. So it's a whole optimization game for the publisher to work around that. And that's sort of what is happening for us today. It's all third party. It's not even us. It's not ad server, not SSAI. It's not first party at all, or anything that we even license or partner with. It's completely third party.
That answer, yeah.
Overabundance of fast channels. Personalization against the oligarchs sort of determining. I wonder if even if this vast new sea I love this concept of.
Yeah, I forget where I read it, but someone's been toying with the idea in the fast space of allowing consumers to actually create a customized fast channel with their entire library. So think of Warner Brothers, who has almost like 300 fast channels. Like, they're one of the leaders in the fast space. And they would put all of that inventory out there in some kind of platform that would allow a user to come in and be like, these are my 10 favorite shows, right, out of this, and there might be some home improvement and some, you know, old 70s or 80s shows that they've got up there, and then that creates them their own fast channel. So instead of having to flick through the hundreds that they've got out there, because their channels sometimes are often show specific, especially if they're dealing with 20 seasons of inventory, right? And I think that's a way that we could see some of that collapse. But again, that goes back to, you've got to have that volume, right? Usually, in order to make that happen. And if you don't have the volume, the ability to acquire the volume.
I think the personalized fast channels are going to completely change the lean back, lean forward debate we just had.
Absolutely.
Well, I think one thing we haven't really, that oddly hasn't been explored, maybe due to the sort of development cycle for consumer electronics, is that when you're buying a TV, you're buying a computer, and the entire fast interface, or even the SVOD interfaces that we have, are actually so unlike the internet. And, you can't link from one thing to another. You're like stuck in, the Jeff Bridges original Tron when you're watching, when you buy a CTV now. And, you really should be able to navigate it in a more internet-like experience, which I think is why we're seeing such a surge of people watching YouTube on their TVs, because that's really where they've started. If you were a young person, you started with a phone and a laptop, it just feels natural to watch YouTube on your TV, as opposed to these clunky fast and SVOD interfaces that we have, which are kind of based on an internet that existed 15, 20 years ago that some people are still clinging to.
And I believe that there's a generational point in that. So the new generations they get bored at 5 seconds if they don't choose what they are watching or they are consuming and so on. And absolutely, I believe that this amount of metadata, amount of content and so on, so every platform is desperate to grasp the user's attention as quick as possible and maintain it for as long as possible. The UI is a billboard in a way, so you need to put the right content in there and make sure that as quick as you can, you build the personalized experience that will retain the audience. So on that, I believe that the only possibility is having AI doing that and processing the metadata, or generating the metadata, enriching it, and well, processing the user's preferences and doing that as live as possible as well. And there are solutions for that already.
I'll be curious to see the impact of some of the Gen I tagging stuff, because truthfully, we've had pretty robust tagging solutions before, even before generative AI came in the mix, right?
You don't want to name it, right?
Yeah. And so, you know, some of this is marketing, right? Like Vevo, certainly we've sold contextual targets at scale well before generative AI became a thing. It's very possible to do this without Gen AI. Gen AI adds a level of complexity and depth that wasn't there before, but it's going to take time for the advertiser community to care about that and want to target against that greater depth, I think.
I think there was one more question over here. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, so for us, I would consider our first party data, I think some of our most powerful first party data is actually our ad server data. Because the ad server data you can also use to back into a lot of consumption information, viewership information. This is particular to us because the majority of our inventory is distributed via other endpoints, right? We don't have an app, we do have an app, but that is only a minority of our viewership. Huge majority is coming from endpoints, YouTube, Samsung, Roku, Hulu. And so any information about the viewers, really, it's theirs. It's not ours. That's certainly not our first party. But I would argue that our ad server data, which is quite rich and can be tapped into to create a lot of audiences and deeper understanding of our business, that I would consider to be ours. That's sort of my off-the-cuff perspective.
I'd agree. Well, there's nothing better.
Well, if not that, then nothing, I guess.
Unless you, I mean, it depends whether you're free or an SVOD service, and I think obviously those are two, FAST and SVOD are two very different approaches to first-party data.
Okay, well, I think, well, sure, take one more. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a real incentive right now to share the data with the channel owners, but I do think that we are just seeing, like Stephanie said, a fatigue among consumers with their, being treated like data. And so we are, I think CPMs should be an incentive, better CPMs, a more premium experience, better metrics should be an incentive. I don't know that we're at that point right now.
Okay. Well, thank you to our panel, Christy, Bruno, Natasha, Stephanie.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
And we will be back at 4:15 with Seth Holland, the mayor of Hollywood.